Here's Lester Holt.
Good evening. We are coming on the air to cover a historic moment. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is about to address a joint session of Congress in person. This is the Ukrainian leader's first foreign trip since Russia's invasion began in February. It comes with great personal risk. The trip shrouded in secrecy for fear of Russian assassination attempts on his way out and soon back into his country. Earlier today, President Zelenskyy met with President Biden at the White House. Zelenskyy is here not only to thank the U.S. for its billions of dollars in support, but also to try to shore up future aid, as some Republicans in Congress have expressed skepticism toward approving more funding. What we're going to see here at the start will be in some ways similar to what you see at a State of the Union address, with Zelenskyy, in this case, entering and shaking hands with members of Congress along the aisle as he makes his way to the front of the chamber. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles is with us now from just outside where the speech is going to take place. And Ryan, can you tell us what the specific message President Zelenskyy wants to deliver tonight?
Well, first of all, Lester, it is going to be a message of thanks for the millions and millions of dollars that the United States Congress has appropriated to help the war effort in Ukraine. And then after he offers that thanks on behalf of his people, he is then going to ask for more. Of course, the House and Senate right now are in a fierce debate over an omnibus spending package that includes $45 billion in additional aid for Ukraine. He is going to ask both members of the House and Senate to pass that bill through so that assistance comes through, and then specifically talk to Republicans in the House of Representatives who will take power in the new year to express the hope that they would continue that assistance as it becomes needed down the road. Of course, members of the House of Representatives from the Republican side have expressed concern about the amount of money that's being spent to help Ukraine, and a concern that it cannot be an endless spigot of cash that goes to help the war effort without some level of oversight. Now, it's important to point out, Lester, that we've just learned in the last few minutes that prior to this speech that the president did meet with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, with the Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, and with Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, the Democratic and Republican leaders of the United States Senate, in a private meeting. You would have to imagine in that meeting, Zelenskyy gave them a very clear and sober perspective as to what exactly the situation like on the ground in Ukraine, and express the need for the U.S. to continue to support that war effort. So this is going to be an important moment for the Ukrainian president as we move forward in this conversation about the level of U.S. involvement, and specifically the amount that U.S. taxpayers are willing to pay for this effort. It's really not just these members of Congress that he needs to convince here tonight, Lester. It's also the American people that will be watching on a nationally televised broadcast. Many Americans who may have been checked out of this situation in Europe and just how dangerous it is. So there's no doubt that he has a big responsibility here tonight, and that there is a lot on the line for the Ukrainian president and the people of Ukraine as he comes here to Washington during this very pivotal time for his country. Lester?
As we await President Zelenskyy to enter the chamber, let me ask you, Ryan, we heard President Biden today talk several times. He noted the bipartisan nature of the American support for the Ukraine's war effort. Do we know if the White House suggested this idea of speaking before Congress?
So the way we understand it, Lester, is that it was the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi who extended the invitation to Volodymyr Zelenskyy. She has been someone that has been very supportive of his efforts in Ukraine. She has been one of the chief negotiators in this process, who has worked hard to make sure that the funding is secured for Ukraine and the people there. She, of course, is exiting as the Speaker of the House in the next couple of weeks. She's going to remain in Congress, but she'll no longer be part of Democratic leadership. So it is significant that she will be presiding over her last joint session of Congress, a joint meeting of Congress, I should say, in particular. So this is a significant moment for her. So the idea that, that the president would come here and not just meet with President Biden, but also come here to Capitol Hill and make a specific plea to the appropriators. It is Congress who decides how the American taxpayers' money is spent. That is certainly symbolic and understanding of how the process works here in the United States. And I should point out, Lester, that I talked to a number of senators, both Republican and Democrat, who said that it's one thing to listen to the dispatches in meetings from American diplomats, even from intelligence officers, about what the situation is like in Ukraine in some static conference room here on Capitol Hill. It is much different to look into the eyes of the man who's at the front lines of this situation, someone who was on the front lines of this war just yesterday, and to get a clear understanding of just how difficult things are there and how important and necessary this funding is. It makes a much different situation than it would if you're just continuing to get these briefings. So I think that is also a big part of it. We should also point out, though, Lester, that there's going to be many Republicans who probably need to hear this message the most that just aren't going to be here. Representative Tom Massey, for instance, who is a member of the Freedom Caucus, someone who is not in favor of the extended Ukrainian spending, just tweeted out moments ago that he would not be in attendance, and he describes Zelenskyy as a lobbyist for Ukraine as opposed to being the president of this country in the middle of a war. So this is not going to be a difficult ask for the lion's share of Congress. Most Republicans and Democrats are in support of this effort, but there is a small and very influential group of Republicans that believe that this spending needs to be reined in on some level.
Yeah, Ryan, and we're just seeing a glimpse there of President Zelenskyy, who is being introduced now, making his way down the aisle, and as we expected, greeting some of the lawmakers here who were in attendance of this joint meeting of Congress. He has enjoyed a broad American support, but as Ryan noted, not entire support within the U.S. Congress, as the appetite for, as we've heard before, an open checkbook, perhaps not checkbook, not exactly what we have seen in the past. Historic moment. This is the first time that he has left his country since the war that we're aware of, making this trip under massive security blanket for obviously fear for his safety, getting out of Ukraine, getting to the U.S. He arrived at Joint Base Andrews aboard a U.S. aircraft, U.S. military VIP aircraft today, and now standing as and silent as a standing ovation is sent his way. As we watch Peter Alexander, our chief White House correspondent, standing by with us, before he speaks, perhaps you can give a sense of what the White House read was on today's several hours of meetings between the two presidents.
Yeah, Lester, we're going to hear from Volodymyr Zelenskyy in a matter of moments, so I'll be very brief here, but it's just a striking image to see him in his military green in a room of American politicians, a man who was literally 24 hours removed from the battlefield this time yesterday, was in eastern Ukraine on the front lines, and now just completed a visit with President Biden at the White House, private time in the Oval Office, delivering remarks here as well, and an opportunity he has communicated to say thanks to the American people. A really powerful and moving day that, frankly, 10 months ago, very few people in the U.S., including many within the administration, frankly, did not think would come, that Volodymyr Zelenskyy could bring his country to this place where it had fended off Russia for much of the last year. Lester?
All right, Peter.
Members of Congress.
I think it's too much.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of the Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's too much for me. All this for our great people. Thank you so much. Dear Americans, in all states, cities, and communities. All those who value freedom and justice, who cherish it as strongly as we Ukrainians, in all our cities, in each and every family. I hope my words of respect and gratitude resonate in each American heart. Madam Vice President, I thank you for your efforts in helping Ukraine. Madam Speaker, you bravely visited Ukraine during the full-fledged war. Thank you very much. Great honor. Thank you. Great privilege to be here. Dear members of the Congress, representatives of both parties, who also visited Kiev, esteemed congressmen and senators from both parties who will visit Ukraine, I'm sure, in the future. Dear representatives of diaspora, present in this chamber and spread across the country, dear journalists. It's a great honor for me to be at the US Congress and speak to you and all Americans. Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. Thank you. And it gives me good reason to share with you our first joint victory. We defeated Russia in the battle for minds of the world. We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it. Ukrainians gained this victory, and it gives us courage, which inspires the entire world. Americans gained this victory, and that's why you have succeeded in uniting the global community to protect freedom and international law. Europeans gained this victory, and that's why Europe is now stronger and more independent than ever. The Russian tyranny has lost control over us. And it will never influence our minds again. Yet, we have to do whatever it takes to ensure that countries of the global south also gain such victory. I know one more, I think, very important thing. The Russians will stand a chance to be free only when they defeat the Kremlin in their minds. Yet, the battle continues, and we have to defeat the Kremlin on the battlefield. Yes, this battle is not only for the territory, for this or another part of Europe. The battle is not only for life, freedom and security of Ukrainians or any other nation which Russia attempts to conquer. This struggle will define in what world our children and grandchildren will live, and then their children and grandchildren. It will define whether it will be a democracy of Ukrainians and for Americans for all. This battle cannot be frozen or postponed. It cannot be ignored, hoping that the ocean or something else will provide a protection. From the United States to China, from Europe to Latin America, and from Africa to Australia, the world is too interconnected and interdependent to allow someone to stay aside and at the same time to feel safe when such a battle continues. Our two nations are allies in this battle. And next year will be a turning point. I know it, the point when Ukrainian courage and American resolve must guarantee the future of our common freedom, the freedom of people who stand for their values. Ladies and gentlemen, Americans, yesterday before coming here to Washington, D.C., I was at the front line in our Bakhmut, in our stronghold in the east of Ukraine, in the Donbass. The Russian military and mercenaries have been attacking Bakhmut non-stop since May. They have been attacking it day and night, but Bakhmut stands. Last year, 70,000 people lived there in Bakhmut, in this city, and now only few civilians stay. Every inch of that land is soaked in blood. Roaring guns sound every hour. Trenches in the Donbass change hands several times a day in fierce combat and even hand fighting, but the Ukrainian Donbass stands. Russians use everything they have against Bakhmut and our beautiful cities. The occupiers have a significant advantage in artillery. They have an advantage in ammunition. They have much more missiles and planes than we ever had. And it's true, but our defense forces stand. And we all are proud of them. The Russians' tactic is primitive. They burn down and destroy everything they see. They send thugs to the front lines. They send convicts to the war. They threw everything against us, similar to the other tyranny, which is in the Battle of the Bulge. Threw everything it had against the free world, just like the brave American soldiers which held their lines and fought back Hitler's forces during the Christmas of 1944. Brave Ukrainian soldiers are doing the same to Putin's forces this Christmas. Ukraine holds its lines and will never surrender. So here is the front line. The tyranny which has no lack of cruelty against the lives of free people. And your support is crucial, not just to stand in such fight, but to get to the turning point to win on the battlefield. We have artillery. Yes. Thank you. We have it. Is it enough? Honestly, not really. To ensure Bakhmut is not just a stronghold that holds back the Russian army, but for the Russian army to completely pull out, more cannons and shells are needed. If so, just like the Battle of Saratoga, the fight for Bakhmut will change the trajectory of our war for independence and for freedom. If your patriots stop the Russian terror against our cities, it will let Ukrainian patriots work to the full to defend our freedom. When Russia cannot reach our cities, but its artillery, it tries to destroy them with missile attacks. More than that, Russia found an ally in this genocidal policy, Iran. Iranian deadly drones sent to Russia in hundreds became a threat to our critical infrastructure. That is how one terrorist has found the other. It is just a matter of time when they will strike against your other allies. If we do not stop them now, we must do it. I believe there should be no taboos between us in our alliance. Ukraine never asked the American soldiers to fight on our land instead of us. I assure you that Ukrainian soldiers can perfectly operate American tanks and planes themselves. Financial assistance is also critically important, and I would like to thank you very much. Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way. Russia could stop its aggression, really, if it wanted to, but you can speed up our victory. I know it. And it will prove to any potential aggressor that no one can succeed in breaking national borders, no one committing atrocities and reigning over people against their will. It would be naive to wait for steps towards peace from Russia, which enjoys being a terrorist state. Russians are still poisoned by the Kremlin. The restoration of international legal order is our joint task. We need peace. Yes, Ukraine has already offered proposals, which I just discussed with President Biden, our peace formula, 10 points which should and must be implemented for our joint security, guaranteed for decades ahead. And the summit which can be held. I'm glad to stress that President Biden supported our peace initiative today. Each of you, ladies and gentlemen, can assist in the implementation to ensure that America's leadership remains solid, bicameral, and bipartisan. Thank you. You can strengthen sanctions to make Russia feel how ruinous its aggression truly is. It is in your power, really, to help us bring to justice everyone who started this unprovoked and criminal war. Let's do it. Let terrorists Let the terrorist state be held responsible for its terror and aggression and compensate all losses done by this war. Let the world see that the United States are here. Ladies and gentlemen, Americans, in 2 days we will celebrate Christmas, maybe candlelit. Not because it's more romantic, no, but because there will be no electricity. Millions won't have neither heating nor running water. All of this will be the result of Russian missile and drone attacks on our energy infrastructure. But we do not complain. We do not judge and compare whose life is easier. Your well-being is the product of your national security, the result of your struggle for independence and your many victories. We, Ukrainians, will also go through our war of independence and freedom with dignity and success. We'll celebrate Christmas. Celebrate Christmas, and even if there is no electricity, the light of our faith in ourselves will not be put out. If Russian missiles attack us, we'll do our best to protect ourselves. If they attack us with Iranian drones and our people will have to go to bomb shelters on Christmas Eve, Ukrainians will still sit down at the holiday table and cheer up each other. And we don't have to know everyone's wish, as we know that all of us, millions of Ukrainians, wish the same: victory. Only victory. We already built strong Ukraine with strong people, strong army, strong institutions together with you. We developed strong security guarantees for our country and for entire Europe and the world together with you. And also together with you, we'll put in place everyone who will defy freedom. Put in. This will be the basis to protect democracy in Europe and the world over. Now, on the special Christmas time, I want to thank you, all of you. I thank every American family which cherishes the warmth of its home and wishes the same warmth to other people. I thank President Biden and both parties at the Senate and the House for your invaluable assistance. I thank your cities and your citizens who supported Ukraine this year, who hosted our Ukrainians, our people, who waved our national flags, who acted to help us. Thank you all, from everyone who is now at the front line, from everyone who is evading victory. Standing here today, I recall the words of the President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which is, I think, so good for this moment. The American people, in their righteous might, will win through to absolute victory. The Ukrainian people will win too, absolutely. I know that everything depends on us, on Ukrainian armed forces, yet so much depends on the world. So much in the world depends on you. When I was in Bakhmut yesterday, our heroes gave me the flag, the battle flag, the flag of those who defend Ukraine, Europe, and the world at the cost of their lives. They asked me to bring this flag to you, to the US Congress, to members of the House of Representatives and senators whose decisions can save millions of people. So let these decisions be taken. Let this flag stay with you, ladies and gentlemen. This flag is a symbol of our victory. In this war, we stand, we fight, and we will win because we are united. Ukraine, America, and the entire free world. Just one thing, if I can, the last thing, thank you so much. May God protect our brave troops and citizens. May God forever bless the United States of America. Merry Christmas and happy, victorious New Year. Slava Ukraini!
Standing ovation for the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy receiving an American flag in exchange for his gift to the United States Congress, the Ukrainian battle flag.
We'll turn around.
Yes.
There we go. This flag was flown over the Capitol today in honor of the President's visit.
Thank you.
Tonight. We don't often see a lot of unity in that chamber, but tonight both sides seem to be mainly unified in their support of President Zelenskyy and the Ukrainian cause. He came to this body and said, I'm not looking for charity, I'm looking for an investment in global security. He entered and to thunderous applause, what clocked in at 2 minutes, 20 seconds, a standing ovation. He gave thanks to the American people and government for their support. And he spoke bluntly about the horrors of war that his people have withstood. President Zelenskyy vowed that Ukraine's military will hold their lines and they will not surrender. There may have been a lot of truth in a joke he made saying, quote, is it enough? Not really. And ahead of the holiday, he promised that the Ukrainian people will celebrate the holiday defiantly and that all they want as a nation is victory.
Subject to the call of the chair.
That concludes this NBC News special report. Later tonight, please tune into our streaming service, NBC News Now, for the premiere of Life, Death, and Liberation inside Izium, Ukraine. That's at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. But right now, we return you to regular programming already in progress on NBC. I'm Lester Holt. Thank you for watching, and good evening.
Welcome to Now Tonight. I'm Zinklea Samwa. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy just wrapped up his historic address to a joint session of Congress tonight. Per reports, he is on his way back to Ukraine as we speak, a whirlwind trip to Washington, a 12-hour affair at most. This is the leader's first trip outside Ukraine since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February. Today, Zelenskyy met with President Biden, both behind closed doors and in front of the press, during which time President Biden pointed to a new aid package for Ukraine worth around $1.8 billion. That includes Patriot missile systems, considered the most advanced air defense weapon in the American arsenal. Which brings us back to Zelenskyy's address to Congress, where he thanked lawmakers who so far have approved billions of dollars in aid for his country. A historic address right there that we saw, and he was met with rousing round of applause. We heard the Ukrainian president talk about victory in the new year and hopes for encouragements for his soldiers and thanking the American people as well as American lawmakers. He also talked about the grim circumstances his soldiers are facing, bombs dropping every hour, but remained a steadfast leader for his country. And, of course, we saw that beautiful exchange of flags between the Ukrainians and America, a historic address. So let's break it all down now with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joining us now live in Washington, D.C. Monica, this was not a standard diplomatic state visit, right? President Zelenskyy was in Washington for just hours, not even a full day as we understand it. And it's not what we're used to seeing visually either, right? Zelenskyy was in his military sweats from the start of the day to the end as commander, a very historic moment for Ukraine and the U.S. So can you just sum up what we've seen today?
Nothing standard about it, Zinklea. That's exactly right. And really, this was a day of incredible symbolic significance and a show of solidarity. That was the intention from the U.S. government. And President Biden, when he extended this invitation to President Zelenskyy more than a week ago, it wasn't really clear whether this was all going to be able to come together and materialize, given all the different security concerns and moving parts for a visit like this to happen. So the fact that it did is remarkable in and of itself. This is something where President Zelenskyy is very intentional about what he was wearing today, wanting to remind everybody that, of course, he's the president of a nation, but a nation at war, and continuing in that remarkable joint address just now to say, do we really have enough artillery? No, we don't. Do we really have enough weapons? No, we don't. But do we have the spirit and the will to continue to fight in this war and ultimately win it? President Zelenskyy arguing that the Ukrainian people have that, despite being out of power, plunged into cold and darkness as the winter progresses, approaching the Christmas holiday and noting that many Ukrainian citizens won't be able to celebrate anything resembling a normal Christmas, but that they're united in their spirit and feeling of a will to want to have victory over Russia. So President Biden and President Zelenskyy spent a good amount of time together earlier today, meeting behind closed doors, talking to journalists about a potential path forward. But the U.S. is very clear here that they don't want to push President Zelenskyy in any direction when it comes to diplomacy or negotiations. But both men agreed they would, of course, like to see this conflict come to an end. The question is, how much longer will this war stretch on? And then, of course, as you saw President Zelenskyy just request there, he says he wants a lot more help from Congress as lawmakers are considering another $45 billion in emergency aid. But when Republicans are going to take control of the House in just a few short weeks, that blank check, according to wannabe House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, that's what he's hoping for, though it's unclear whether he's going to get it. If that's the case, then that is why President Zelenskyy felt he needed to also come here today, thank the American people, but implore lawmakers to continue to help him, he said.
And I mean, we saw lawmakers unified in a way that we don't typically see, minutes of applause. And we heard pretty candidly from Zelenskyy, right, that he's feeling outgunned even still. So, Monica, talk to us about the military aid we are promising Ukraine right now, specifically related to those Patriot missile systems. There was a time when we, the U.S., did not want to send such systems over. But now President Biden says this is purely defensive. So what does that mean? What has changed?
Yeah, and that is the important word there, defensive, because there were a lot of questions today about the U.S. finally giving Ukraine this battery system. Did that mean that the U.S. is viewing this in escalatory terms? And that was President Biden earlier today saying, no, this is so that they can continue to defend themselves. But yes, it was just a couple of months ago when there was actually a pretty testy phone call between President Zelenskyy and Biden, where he was asking for some additional help in the weaponry department, and where President Biden, according to our reporting, told him that's not something I can do right now. And in effect, you should be grateful for all the help you've gotten so far. Of course, I'm paraphrasing there according to the summary we got from some officials who were briefed on that discussion. So what's notable here, Zinclay, is that now the U.S. feels that this is a point in the war where the U.S. did want to provide Ukraine with these special missile systems. And is it possible they could offer more? That is exactly what President Zelenskyy is asking for, different types of weapons. And it does seem, again, that they would be open to it. But the winter is really what is being weaponized here, according to both presidents, by Russia. So that is why you're seeing a little bit of a turn and a progression here. But again, there's just no telling how much longer this war will stretch on. And that is why the U.S. wants to help Ukraine and has remained steadfast in its support of the country.
Important analysis on this historic night. Thank you, Monica Alba. Now, this wasn't just an opportunity for President Zelenskyy to speak to Congress, but to the people of the world, including his own countrymen watching from Ukraine. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now to talk about this from the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. Matt, it's good to see you. So what's the mood in Ukraine surrounding President Zelensky's trip to the U.S.? This is pretty monumental, as we've said, very clear, his first trip outside the country since the war started.
Well, this is a sensitive trip, Zinclay, because the fact is that the president had remained in Ukraine from the beginning, now 302 days ever since the war began. Remember, the Ukrainian people were so cheered when they first saw the president standing outside of his office here in Kyiv, holding up just like a video selfie and saying the words, "I'm here." This was always his thing. President Zelenskyy remained, and he said he would never leave. And that was a big issue because, of course, there was that Hollywood one-liner early in the war when the United States basically secretly asked him if he needed assistance getting out of Ukraine. And his response, and he made it to the U.S., and then he made it publicly, repeated it to the public, was, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." So this has always been his trademark characteristic. And then now we got to see the House of Representatives, the Congress, the Ukrainian people, the entire world got to see once again the president doing what he does best, what he's done so much and to such great effect since the beginning of this war. And that is just reaching people, talking to them. Remember, this man used to be an actor. before he was president, right before he was president. He didn't hold any public office. His whole thing, ever since the war began, has been appealing to foreign nations. He's addressed them by video chat, he's addressed them by telephone, and he's been doing this, again, to great effect. That's how he's been able to rally so much money, so much materiel to the Ukrainian cause. Now, I can tell you that when you walk around the streets of Kyiv, and you asked me about the mood, I should get to that. President Zelenskyy mentioned something that should be obvious to anyone watching right now. The city behind me is almost completely dark. You can see some lights here on the horizon. There are rolling blackouts, so it's not entirely blacked out. But this is a city cloaked in darkness, a country cloaked in darkness, and one that, as President Zelenskyy said, is going to be enduring the holiday season with very little power, very little energy, and again, lit by candlelight, as the president mentioned, not because it's romantic, but because they have to. So this was a rousing speech and one that was really well received by Congress. And I think it's going to be something that a lot of Ukrainians are going to be really, really glad to see. They are so grateful, and I've talked to so many people here, for Americans. When you tell people here that you're American or that you work for an American network, they are emotional. They have exactly like what Zelenskyy says. They thank you. They want to say, we love what the American people are doing. As Zelenskyy said earlier in his press conference with President Biden, from normal Ukrainians to ordinary Americans, thank you. So this is about ordinary people, taxpayers, but they also want more. And that's one of the things that Monica Alba, my colleague, just mentioned just now. They are getting those Patriot missiles. And I spoke with a member of parliament just today, a member of President Zelenskyy's political party, and she reminded me that, yes, when they asked for those Patriot missiles at the beginning of the war, they got a hard no from Washington. But they managed to bring Washington on side. And now they're going to be getting one. And they want more. They want not just those defensive weapons, ones that can shoot missiles and other projectiles out of the sky, which is what the Patriot missile does. It's a surface-to-air weapon. They want surface-to-surface weapons, something like the ATACMS. Now, this is a military hardware that is very expensive, very sophisticated, and it will allow Ukrainian ground forces to fire missiles into Russian territory, into Russia proper, and into Crimea, which was illegally annexed by Vladimir Putin all the way back in 2014, 2015. Yeah. So that's something that Washington is still really reluctant to commit to, and something that this trip, which is both, it's one part's gratitude, one part victory lap, one part even more begging for more weapons and more money. That's something that President Zelenskyy is going to be asking for. And the more Washington gives, the more that the Ukrainian people, the more the Ukrainian government feels like they can ask for.
And Matt, I mean, it doesn't appear that the intensity of the war will decrease anytime soon. I mean, even the view behind you, right? All of the lights are off. The war is still active. Ukraine says that Russian forces shelled their entire front line in Donetsk just last night, killing one person. So where do things stand with the war right now?
Yeah, it's a really pregnant pause, you could say. And, it's interesting because it's not paused per se. The front lines are static. They're not moving, and they haven't moved for the better part of a month. But there were some really stunning victories, both in the northeastern city of Kharkiv and in the southern city of Kherson, which, well, in the first instance, saw the Ukrainians beat back the Russians in a blitz advance across steppe land. And just push back this, what would have been, what we had all thought was a superior army. And then in Kherson in the south, a couple of weeks later, we saw the Russians essentially walk away from their frontline positions, retreat. And now military analysts say it's certain that they took some of those soldiers from the Kherson area and moved them back up to Bakhmut. And that is where we found President Zelenskyy yesterday, right before he came to Washington. And that's where we saw he presented that battle flag. He presented the medal to President Biden from one of the Ukrainian servicemen in Bakhmut. That battle is raging very fiercely, fought over yards, over feet. Very little ground is being taken or surrendered by either side. That there has been some very small advances by the Russians in the past several days. This battle is now one almost of attrition. And for Kyiv, for the government here, that's a big problem, because a lot of people here assume, probably rightly, that a long-term war favors the Russians. Right. Because the Russians have more people. They ultimately have more money. They are a much, much bigger country. So the only thing standing in the way of Russia taking over this entire country, Vladimir, as the president would say, is the will and the resilience and the strength of the Ukrainian people. But it really is the American money and the American weapons. That is what has tipped the balance in favor of the Ukrainians and allowed them to do something that very few people thought they'd be able to do. Defeat what was thought to be the world's second most powerful army. Zinkley?
And yet they continue to stand. Matt Bradley, live from Kyiv, Ukraine. Thank you so much. Stay safe. And now let's bring in Ambassador John Herbst, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, who joins us now. Thank you for your time, Ambassador. It's been a busy night. So let's start with Zelenskyy. He thanked the U.S. in his address. First, let's take a listen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way.
Your money is not charity, it's an investment. And there was a lot of gratitude we heard from Zelenskyy tonight. Was that a core mission of his visit, to say thank you?
That was one of the reasons he came. A second was to collect, you might say, the Patriots, which is an important decision by the administration to send after many months of delay. But third, also, in a very gentle manner, so he doesn't annoy the administration, to make a pitch for the United States sending more advanced weapons that would enable Ukraine to conduct more quickly a counteroffensive and also to destroy some of the Iranian drones that are pounding Ukraine's cities.
Understandable. And I know, Ambassador, world leaders have addressed joint congressional sessions before, right? We've talked about the historic nature, however, of this, because there are a lot of parallels being drawn between Zelenskyy and Winston Churchill, who's the former prime minister of Britain. He also addressed Congress in 1941. Zelenskyy himself drew parallels with American forces fighting Hitler forces back in 1944. So first, let's listen to part of what he said.
They burn down and destroy everything they see. They send thugs to the front lines. They send convicts to the war. They threw everything against us, similar to the other tyranny, which is in the Battle of the Bulge. Threw everything it had against the free world, just like the brave American soldiers, which held their lines and fought back Hitler's forces during the Christmas of 1944. Brave Ukrainian soldiers are doing the same to Putin's forces this Christmas.
So you said it yourself, Ambassador, right? He was clearly trying to say thank you, but also treading a thin line because they still need resources. So what are your thoughts on how symbolic and how historic this address was, and why do you think he tapped into that history?
It's certainly historic. But you might say the historic meaning depends on whether or not Ukraine eventually wins. I am confident that if American support remains at the current level, Ukraine will defeat Putin, stop this aggression. If American support was greater, sending the more advanced weapons, they could defeat the Russians faster. And I think this visit was a good step to ensuring ongoing major American support to Ukraine and sending a clear message to Putin that the United States is in this to make sure Ukraine wins, and it's time for Putin, to reconsider his aggression in Ukraine.
And it sounds like Putin has responded, right? We've heard that Russia has reacted to this visit. The Kremlin is reportedly saying that the visit will, quote, deepen the conflict. This also comes as the U.S. is providing Ukraine with Patriot missile systems, which you mentioned, right? They need harder missiles and weapons in order to attack Russia. And this is something Russia has warned against, saying there would be unpredictable consequences. And we know Putin is not shy about doing that. So for the U.S., if they gave the system to Ukraine, how do you expect to see Russia respond to this in coming days and weeks, either to the U.S. or to Ukraine?
Well, Russia is not going to attack the United States. They will threaten escalation in order to deter us from protecting our own interests. Zelenskyy was right when he said this is not charity. This is a smart way for the United States to make sure that Putin does not attack our allies in the Baltic states. So the $50 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, is only a small fraction of our defense budget. And that small fraction of our defense budget is destroying far more in value of Russian military assets. So it's a great need for us.
And
please.
Well, lastly, Ambassador, I just wanted to ask, is there anything about this that surprised you, whether Zelensky visiting the U.S. or anything about his remarks that you weren't expecting?
Actually, no. He visited us because President Biden wanted him to come. And of course, he owes a great deal to President Biden. So this is a way for him to collect the patriots and keep Biden happy. And while he made a pitch for the more advanced weapons I've described, he did it in a very gentle way, again, not to annoy his partner in the White House. But it's important that Congress, I think, urge the administration to send the advanced missiles, not to attack Russia itself, but to attack Russian forces within Ukraine.
Ambassador John Herbst, thank you so much for providing your analysis tonight.
Thank you.
And still ahead, be careful what you wish for, because if you were dreaming of a white Christmas, you're likely to get it and then some. Our meteorologist is standing by with a forecast and a warning. Stay close.